article really introduces a number of ideas from the French philosopher Michel Foucault. Is this new for everybody now? How many people has anybody worked with Foucaultian ideas? Okay. Terrific. So, Foucault talks about power not as something that somebody has or some group of people has and other people experience. So it's not, he argues against a simple top-down kind of power and says that power is much more complex than that. Power circulates through institutions, circulates through our practices, circulates through our belief structures, and that who we understand ourselves to be, wherever we happen to be in history, geographically, culturally, wherever we happen to be located in time and place, is the result of history and power dynamics and what has been possible at different times. What kind of ideas are circulating at different times, and how those ideas play out in terms of power. And again, you think of power not as just this, but something that's circulating and interacting all the time. And a key idea that he says evolves, really coming out of the Enlightenment and the changeover from, we have the changeover from sovereign rule, kings and queens ruling, to the idea that we rule ourselves. And if we are to rule ourselves, then we have to discipline ourselves, turn ourselves into good citizens. That's a very, very miniature explanation, but, and this is where he says this idea of disciplining the self starts to develop. We start actually studying ourselves, studying human behavior, studying madness, studying health, what makes a healthy person, what makes a healthy population. Well, the idea of the healthy population is something that evolves throughout the Enlightenment, and we have it now. When you think of the millions of experts who can tell us how to live our lives, how we should eat better, how much exercise we should have every day, an hour and a half, right? This is the latest thing. I don't know if any who watched the news this week. Just me? That's because I had the flu. So I watched the news this week. Apparently, we are all to do high aerobic activity for 90 minutes a day because there was the heart disease. And so anyway, it's just an example of, as we know, it's pretty constant, the advice. And then the millions of self-help books, which are a category, but just sort of a reflection of the same kind of thing that goes on in professions. I mean, we are part of a profession that has tried to analyze how to teach well, how to improve the self through teaching, through learning, through learning music in particular ways. We've developed all these methodologies for improvement.
Sorry, I understand what you're saying about discipline. I don't really see though how it's different from brainwashing. Specifically, like, maybe I just missed that a little bit. How is it different? Because someone, if you're becoming disciplined, even if you do it yourself, you've taken the ideas from your society, and like there's never been a society that was right about anything. It seems like, so if you become disciplined according to someone else's, isn't that brainwashing? You're an active partner in it, which is even worse somehow.
I think what he's trying to say is that we are active partners in producing ourselves. So if I have the idea that I want to be a great French horn player, then I am an active participant in trying to achieve that, to trying to produce myself into that subject. So it's not just that I'm being told I have to do this, but I agree that that there's a gray area there. And people, there are in studies, people do get into a lot of discussion about, well, if this is true, do we have agency at all? Do we have any volition? Am I just a consequence of all of these things around me? And what he's trying to say is that certain things become possible. So the development of institutions lead to other ideas, other ways of doing things which become normal. And what we experience as normal, we don't often have the capacity to step back from and say, well, actually it doesn't have to be this way. It could be totally different. So we might not have music schools like this at all. We might have clubs or whatever. Maybe all music is learned in garages in our culture. We see that as normal, and coming into a building like this is bizarre. So I think what he's trying to get at is for us to start to have that capacity to just notice that things become normalized for various reasons, but they don't have to be that way. And so you want to have that capacity to step back, say, well, what are the dynamics that are involved here? What's the history of how we came from no conservatories, which didn't exist before I think the first one is mid-19th century. Actually, it's earlier than Paris. Late 18th century, first one in Paris. But they didn't exist prior to that. So how did we get from there to here that makes this seem so normal and right? And one of the things that really interests me, and is a big part of my work, is when we look at music schools, professional music schools, as a school professional music teacher, up until very recently it's been almost exclusively white. And if you look around this building, we have a lot of students from Asian countries and a lot of white faces. And are there First Nations people come to conservatories? There's actually a long history of black immigration in Canada. So it's not just that it's people coming from different cultures who might not connect with these particular music traditions. So where are they? Why are they not here as part of this project? So which is not to say that they're not here because we're all racist and we don't want them. That's not what's happening. And so the project is to figure out, well, what are the institutions, what were the ideas, how have we gotten actually to this place, which might not be as ideal as maybe we can imagine it differently. And so when we notice those points of power, how power and institutions and ideas and practices, where they've come from and what they actually produce, and to start to take them apart, then we open up space to think, well, okay, so what can we do differently? It doesn't, as I'm grateful because you've been nodding your head when I say it doesn't have to be like this. It could be totally different. It didn't have to evolve this way. And when he talks about this, one of the big points he's trying to make is that history is not a progression of primitive to civilized to advanced. So our social arrangements now do not represent the high point of human evolution. But there is certainly that idea is in circulation. If you think of the concept of